I'm digging, 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 digging. Now I'm a farmer, and I'm digging, 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 digging. It's a loving, a charming, it is to be a farming, and farming, the effects of the air.
Alright, welcome back, young scholars. In this video we will be discussing how some humans made that transition from hunting and gathering in the Paleolithic era to beginning the practice of agriculture. So in other words, we're going to be talking about the agricultural revolution. So the big questions we need to be able to answer after watching this video are: 1. Why did our ancestors shift from hunting and gathering to farming? 2. What impact did the location of domesticated plants and animals have on societies around the world? And 3. In what ways did the agricultural revolution lead to new and more complex economic and social systems? So let's start with that first big question. Why did our ancestors shift from hunting and gathering to farming? Now, to understand why this shift occurred, we first have to understand how it occurred. So around 10,000 years ago, people in different parts of the world, independently, began domesticating localized plants and animals. Now, domestication means they were changing or controlling wild plants and animals for use by humans. So for example, there was a wild grass called teosinte, and humans would eventually, specifically Native Americans, would eventually transform this wild grass teosinte into our modern day corn. Likewise, another crop, Musa balbisania. Oh, that does not look appetizing, but once it was domesticated, eventually became our modern day banana. So this transformation among certain societies worldwide from hunting and gathering to settled agriculture is known as the agricultural revolution, or sometimes referred to as the Neolithic Revolution. So the agricultural revolution marks the beginning of a new period in history where human beings made that transition from the Paleolithic era, where everyone was a hunter-gatherer, to the Neolithic era, where human beings again began developing farming practices. And this transition took place around 8000 BCE. So again, the definition for the agricultural revolution or the Neolithic revolution is this gradual change from hunting and gathering to settled farming. It's a change that took place, again, at different spots around the world over a course of thousands of years. We go from human beings using cruder stone tools in the Paleolithic era to smaller, sharper, more precise cutting instruments like this sickle. Now the term Neolithic is an important one, and you can again understand it based on its Greek roots. So neo means new, and lithic, means stone. So Neolithic era means the new Stone Age, where farmers were developing more complex stone tools. So what caused this transformation? Back to the original question. What caused people independently around the world to make this transition to agriculture around 8000 BCE? So after all, they had been living as hunter-gatherers for hundreds of millennium. Now the most likely cause of the agricultural revolution was the transformation in climate at the end of the last ice age, around 10,000 years ago. Now, as we discussed in the last video, humans are excellent at adapting to their environment. So in this case, they adapted to the warmer, wetter climate in certain regions by taking up farming. And they also, in some cases, were maybe forced into this as a result of the extinction of certain large mammal species, for example, the woolly mammoth, which died out right around the same time period. Now, looking at our next big question, what impact did the location of domesticated plants and animals have on societies around the world? Now, what I want you to do is imagine you are one of the first farmers in the Neolithic era, and you have a choice to start your farm in one of 3 locations around the world. Each location has different domesticated animals and plants that are native to your particular region or location. So which location would you choose, and why would you choose it? Let's start with location A. The native domesticated animals that are available that are large are the llama. The native domesticated plants are corns, beans, peanuts, potatoes, and squash. Location B has no native domesticated animals, but they do have lions, hippos, zebras, giraffes, and elephants. In terms of their native domesticated plants, they have sorghum, yams, peas, and melons. Now, location C has cows, pigs, horses, sheep, goats as domesticated animals, and wheat, rice, beans, barley, peas, and cucumbers as native domesticated plants. So my guess is that most of you probably chose location C to start your farm based on the plethora of different domesticated animals and domesticated plants in that location. Now, why this is important is related to a book called Guns, Germs, and Steel by Jared Diamond. And in the book, Diamond takes up this huge question. Why do people of Eurasian origin dominate the world in wealth and power? And why have the people of the Americas and Africa been decimated, subjugated, and in some cases even exterminated by European colonists? And what Diamond sort of starts with is that difference in the localized domesticated plants and animals. And he says there were certain regions of the world that were geographically blessed. So, for example, location A would have been in the Americas because the llama, potatoes, corn were all domesticated in that region. Location B would have been a farm located in sub-Saharan Africa, where there's no major domesticated animals. Location C was Eurasia. Now, location C and location B, you see, are right next to each other. However, during this Neolithic era and Paleolithic era, there was really very little contact between those two regions as a result of this major geographic barrier, the Sahara Desert. So what Diamond argues is that as a result of being geographically blessed, the people of Eurasia were able to get a head start on the race towards progress.
Ready? Go!
And that eventually is going to allow people of Eurasia to dominate the people of Africa and the Americas by developing things first, such as guns, and also, as a result of their contact with domesticated animals, developing diseases at an earlier rate than others who were in Africa and the Americas. So let's do a quick exercise and look at these various cradles of farming around the world. These are all places where farming developed independently. So location A is known as Mesoamerica or Middle America. Location B is in the Andes Mountains down there in South America. Location C, we're talking about Central Africa. Location D is the Fertile Crescent, sometimes referred to as Mesopotamia later on. Location E, we're in Central Asia. Location F in China. Location G in Southeast Asia. And location H, we're in New Guinea down there. So in terms of the domesticated plants and animals in each of these regions, take a second to try and match them up. So in Mesoamerica, we had corn, tomatoes, cotton, and the turkey. In the Andes Mountains, we have potatoes and the llama. In Central Africa, we have sorghum and cattle. In the Fertile Crescent, we have wheat, cattle, goats, pigs, and sheep. In Central Asia, we have horses and camels. In China, we have rice and the pig. In Southeast Asia, we have chicken and bananas. In New Guinea, we have the taro root. So again, these are all places where these domesticated plants and animals independently were domesticated, and then eventually these plants and animals would spread from these core hearths of farming. So for our third big question, we need to answer, in what ways did the Neolithic Revolution lead to new and more complex economic and social systems? So if we start in the Paleolithic era where everyone was hunter-gatherers, eventually we're going to start to see the domestication of plants and animals, as we just mentioned, in various places around the world. Now, the domestication of plants and animals is going to lead to more sedentary farming communities. Sedentary means settled down, not moving, no longer nomadic. Now, the earliest sedentary farming communities, such as Çatalhöyük in Turkey, modern-day Turkey, and Jericho in Palestine, arose in the eastern Mediterranean. Now, if you look at these images, what do they suggest about the social and cultural characteristics of early farming communities? One thing you may note is that in the image of Chattahoochee, there's no doors on the lower level. So that may suggest what? That these people were very focused on ensuring their protection and defense. And so they could lift up these ladders to very quickly to defend themselves in the case of an invasion by outsiders who may have been trying to get access to some of their wealth and technology. And also we have this image of the fertility goddess, which is a carryover from the Paleolithic era. So potentially, again, some religion that was being practiced there that's related to female fertility and the importance of that. Suggests that these were still fairly egalitarian or equal societies in terms of gender roles. Now, what did sedentary farming communities lead to? Oh, surplus food. So much food that we can just shovel it down our mouths in a competitive eating fashion. So sedentary farming communities eventually is going to lead to surplus food, which is a really critical turning point in world history. So surplus food is going to lead to a number of different effects. First, we have a growth in world population. So population growth, which leads to larger families. Because these farmers were sedentary, it's easier to raise kids when you're settled down, when you're not nomadic and moving around. Second, back in the Paleolithic era where everyone was a hunter-gatherer, right? I had berries, you had very similar types of berries. Now we have, I've got corn, for example, and maybe somebody in our society also begins becoming an artisan, creating crafts. So we have specialized job. Not everyone has to hunt or gather anymore or farm. And so we see the rise of specialized jobs such as military soldiers, merchants, artisans. Now, as a result of this, we can also start to see the increase in economic activity or trade, because now we have different resources, and so in order to gain various resources, we can engage in trade or economic activity. Now, in terms of the social effects of the agricultural revolution, who is looking at this? This artifact is called the Standard of Ur from Mesopotamia around 2600 BCE. Now, in analyzing this particular artifact, who's the most wealthy and powerful group, and is there one single wealthy or powerful person? So the most wealthy group would be from this top row, and you can tell just by the way they're just kind of hanging out and chilling. Looks like they're kind of drinking something, enjoying some music. And the single most wealthy, powerful person is the person who's oftentimes depicted as the largest. So this would be some kind of king or monarch. Now, who is the least wealthy or least powerful? That would be these people on the bottom of the standard who are almost faceless and engaging in all kinds of strenuous labor. Now, what group of people are missing? Do you notice anything? At least based on this image, it appears like there's very few women that are shown in this image, suggesting that women's role in society is diminishing. So some other actual effects of the agricultural revolution, really critically important. Fourth, it leads to the formation of class inequality and social hierarchy. Fifth, it leads to gender inequality and patriarchy. During the Paleolithic era, we said everyone in hunting and gathering societies were relatively equal because men and women were bringing in an equal amount of calories. Now we have clear gender distinctions forming in patriarchal societies. And then finally, because of the close proximity of people to animals, we see the transmission of diseases and the spread increasingly of diseases such as smallpox, influenza, and eventually we'll talk a lot about the plague. So surplus food has all of these huge monumental effects on world history, including the growth of population, specialized jobs, trade, class inequality, gender inequality, and diseases. So after watching this video, you should be able to answer, why did our ancestors shift from hunting and gathering to farming? What impacts did the location of domesticated plants and animals have on societies around the world? And in what ways did the agricultural revolution lead to new and more complex economic and social systems? Thanks for watching. Social systems. So let's start with that first big question. Why did our ancestors shift from hunting and gathering to farming? Now, to understand why this shift occurred, we first have to understand how it occurred. So around 10,000 years ago, people in different parts of the world, independently, began domesticating localized plants.
Now I'm a farmer, and I'm digging, 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 digging. Now I'm a farmer, and I'm digging, 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 digging. It's a loving, a charming, it is to be a farmer.
So the big questions we need to be able to answer after watching this video are: 1. Why did our ancestors shift from hunting and gathering to farming? 2. What impact did the location of domesticated plants and animals have on societies around the world? And 3. In what ways did the agricultural revolution lead to new and more complex economic and social... Alright, welcome back, young scholars. In this video we will be discussing how some humans made that transition from hunting and gathering in the Paleolithic era to beginning the practice of agriculture. So in other words, we're going to be talking about the agricultural revolution and animals. Now, domestication means they were changing or controlling wild plants and animals for use by humans. So for example, there was a wild grass called teosinte, and humans would eventually